The giant beast roared, its 6 armored legs pounding the earth so hard that Commander Jala felt the vibration in her teeth. She watched through her binoculars as the massive war creature, a Grunthor, crashed through the Allied defense line, tossing tanks aside like toys. The aliens called Vasari had brought 3 of these monsters to the battlefield, and nothing in humanity's arsenal seemed capable of stopping them. "We're going to lose this valley by nightfall," muttered Sergeant Breeks beside her, his normally cheerful face now grim with worry. Jala lowered her binoculars. The aliens' alliance with the Grunthors had turned the tide of the war. The creatures stood 30 feet tall, with skin like steel and mouths full of teeth that could crush concrete. Each one carried a platform on its back, where Vasari controllers sat, directing the beasts with their neural connectors. The Vasari, with their pale blue skin and 4 eyes, looked almost delicate compared to their war beasts. "Maybe not," Jala said, an idea forming in her mind. Crazy, but what choice did they have? "Have we tried riding one?" Sergeant Breeks looked at her like she'd suggested they fly to the moon on a paper airplane. "Commander, those things eat people who get near them. The Vasari spend years bonding with them through those neural helmets." Jala watched as a Grunthor's massive tail whipped through a communication tower, sending it crashing down in a shower of sparks. "The Vasari aren't the only ones who can bond with animals. Get me Private Dawes." 20 minutes later, Marley Dawes stood before Jala in the command tent, looking confused. The lanky private with dark curly hair was known throughout the base for one thing: an uncanny ability with animals. She'd tamed the camp's stray dogs, befriended local wildlife, and once calmed a charging bull that had wandered onto the training field. "You wanted to see me, Commander?" Marley asked, her eyes wide with nervousness. Jala nodded. "Private, I have a mission for you that's unusual. What do you know about the enemy's Grunthors?" Marley's face brightened instantly. "Amazing creatures. Their skin contains millions of sensory receptors. The Vasari think they're controlling them, but from what I've observed, it's more like a partnership. The beasts allow it because they're getting something in return." "And what's that?" Jala asked, surprised by the private's knowledge. "Emotion," Marley said simply. "Grunthors feed on emotional energy. The Vasari are giving them the thrill of battle, the excitement of conquest, but they're not fully bonded. Not really. The Vasari don't have enough emotional range." Jala leaned forward. "And humans do?" Marley nodded enthusiastically. "We feel everything so intensely: love, fear, hope, determination. Our emotions are like a feast compared to the Vasari's bland diet." "Then I need you to bond with one and turn it against them," Jala said, laying out her desperate plan. Breeks looked horrified. "Commander, this is suicide." But Marley was already nodding. "I've been watching them. There's one, the youngest, I think. It hesitates sometimes, like it's uncertain. I could try with that one." That night, under the cover of darkness, Marley crawled through the mud of no man's land. She wore a makeshift version of the neural connector they'd salvaged from a dead Vasari soldier. It wasn't perfect, but it might be enough to establish contact. The young Grunthor was tethered at the edge of the enemy camp, its massive body rising and falling with each breath. Marley approached slowly, her heart pounding so hard she was sure the beast would hear it. As she got closer, the creature's 6 eyes opened, glowing faintly in the darkness. Marley froze. The Grunthor could crush her with 1 foot, or swallow her whole. Instead, it lowered its massive head, sniffing curiously. Marley reached out with trembling fingers and placed the neural connector against her temple. The device hissed as it activated, and suddenly her mind was flooded with alien sensations: hunger, power, and a deep loneliness that took her breath away. "Hello," she whispered, both aloud and in her mind. "I'm Marley." The Grunthor's consciousness touched hers, curious but wary. There were no words, just feelings and images. Marley opened herself completely, letting the creature feel her fear, her determination, her hope for peace, and her love for her world. It was like turning on a faucet of emotion, pouring everything she had into the connection. The beast made a rumbling sound, somewhere between a purr and a growl. It pushed its enormous head against her, nearly knocking her over. In her mind, she felt something new, interest, even excitement. "Would you help us?" Marley asked, showing the Grunthor images of the Visari being driven away, of peace returning to the valley. She shared her memories of home, playing with her dog, swimming in clear lakes, running through fields under bright sunshine. The Grunthor's response was a surge of longing so powerful it brought tears to Marley's eyes. These creatures weren't natural fighters. They had been taken from their home, trained for war because they were powerful. But what they craved was connection, not conquest. Marley climbed up the Grunthor's leg, using the handholds the Visari had installed for their own access. When she reached the control platform, she found 2 sleeping Visari. She quietly pushed them off, watching them land with soft thumps on the ground below. The Grunthor didn't react. Its loyalty had already shifted. As dawn broke, the Allied forces were preparing for what they believed would be their final stand. When they heard the thundering of massive footsteps approaching, soldiers raised their weapons, then froze in astonishment at the sight before them. A Grunthor was charging toward their lines, but instead of Visari controllers on its back, a single human figure sat there, wild curly hair flying in the wind. Marley had decorated the beast with strips of human flags and colored cloths she'd found. "Hold your fire," Jala shouted as the impossible duo approached. The Grunthor skidded to a halt before them, lowering itself so Marley could climb down. "Commander," Marley said, her eyes bright with excitement. "This is Titan. He wants to help us." The Visari attacked at midday, the remaining 2 Grunthors leading their charge. But as they crested the hill, they stopped abruptly at the sight that met them. The 3rd Grunthor standing with the humans, Marley once again mounted on its back. "They won't believe it," Breek said, watching through his binoculars. "Their perfect war beasts turned against them." "It's not turned against them," Marley corrected. "Titan is making a choice. They all could if given the chance." She placed her hand on the Grunthor's massive neck, and the creature bellowed, a sound so loud it seemed to shake the mountains themselves. To everyone's astonishment, the 2 enemy Grunthors responded with their own calls. "What's happening?" Jala asked. Marley smiled. "They're talking. Titan is telling them about choice, about connection, about how humans feel everything so deeply." Before their eyes, the remaining Grunthors began to shake, their bodies twisting as the Visari controllers fought to maintain dominance. One beast reared up, throwing its riders to the ground. The other followed suit, the Visari tumbling from its back, like rag dolls. The alien commanders watched in horror as their unstoppable war beasts turned and approached the human lines, not to attack, but to join their brother. Marley dismounted and walked forward, reaching out to the newcomers, her neural connector glowing faintly at her temple. "Impossible," a captured Visari officer whispered later, as the 3 Grunthors helped human engineers rebuild the destroyed communication tower. "We spent decades perfecting the neural bond. How did you take control?" "We didn't," Jala explained, watching Marley playing with the smallest Grunthor, tossing a makeshift ball that the creature batted back with surprising gentleness. "That's what you never understood. These beings can't be controlled. They can only be befriended." The Visari stared, his 4 eyes blinking in confusion. "But they are war beasts." "No," Jala said. "They're just beings far from home, looking for connection. Humans understand that better than anyone. We're not taming your war beasts, we're giving them a choice, and they're choosing us." 2 weeks later, when the Visari launched their desperate final assault, they were met not by human tanks and soldiers, but by a line of 20 Grunthors, each with a human rider sharing their emotions, their resolve, their fierce love of freedom. The sight was enough to make the alien forces retreat. As the Visari ships lifted off into the atmosphere, Marley stood beside Titan, her hand resting on his massive leg. "What do you think they'll tell their leaders?" she asked Jala. The commander watched the ships disappear into the clouds, then looked at the gathered Grunthors, now adorned with colorful human decorations, playing with their riders in the valley that had so recently been a battlefield. "They'll tell them the truth," Jala said, with a smile. "That humans don't just fight wars. We make friends with monsters and turn enemies into family, and that's why we'll always be more dangerous than any weapon they create."